Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay. I'm Dr. James Conyers, Director of Africana Studies, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2016 celebration of Africana Studies here at Kean University. We've been doing this now for how many years? My assistant is here. How many years? We've been doing this now for 30 years. Of course, I haven't been here the entire 30 years. I've only been here 25 of the 30. My predecessor, Dr. Barbara Wheeler, founded the Department of Africana Studies here at Kean University in 1987. And I've tried ever since I've been the director, which has been now, I was once the assistant director, I'm now the director. And I think I've been the director, I've lost count, but at least, what, 15 years now, somewhere in there. And so I've tried to keep the ball rolling and try to be innovative with our programs, which leads me to the point. This year, we decided to revisit a program that we had done many years ago, I guess maybe 20 years ago, on health and wellness in the African community. By African, I mean the black community. However, health and wellness is an important topic for everybody. And so hopefully everybody will get something out of this. And we're going to continue to revisit this topic and connect this topic with other topics in terms of history and politics and all of the things that we do here in Africana Studies. Before I introduce our first speaker, let me just say I'm hoping that all of you will go on to the website once we get it up. And is it up? The website our website is still up, right? Okay, once we get the website up, if it's not already up, go in and check out some of our programs in terms of Africana Studies. And also, those of you who are interested in Africana Studies as a minor, we have a brand new minor, all right? And you need to come to the Office of Africana Studies if you're interested in that, or go online, or give us a call, and we'll tell you all of the details about the minor. It's an 18-credit course of study. It's not going to take you far afield from what you're doing in other areas, so there's not going to be any real additional effort. And you can even have an Africana Studies minor along with the minor that you already have and along with your major. So consider it. One final thing, because I may forget to do this later on. Today's the last day of this 3-day program. However, December 15th, we're going to be celebrating Kwanzaa in Downs Hall. Now, for those of you who don't know what Kwanzaa is, Kwanzaa started out as an African-American holiday. Kwanzaa is no longer an African-American holiday. It's a holiday of African people. And those of you who show up, it's going to be December 15th in Downs Hall. I think we begin at 1 o'clock. We're going to try to feed as many people as we can. I know when I say food, everybody comes out, right? At least for that. We're going to try to feed as many people as we can. It's going to be a first-come, first-served basis. We're going to have entertainment, and you can learn something about this holiday, which is not only has become more than a national holiday, it's now a global holiday. I've actually celebrated Kwanzaa in South Africa and in Egypt and all over the place, everywhere I travel, so in the Caribbean islands, so it's everywhere, and all are welcome. You do not have to be of African descent to come to our Kwanzaa celebration. So if you're interested in finding out about Kwanzaa and what we mean about Kwanzaa and what we do during Kwanzaa and what we do during the rest of the year, that's for you. Okay. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who's going to spend maybe 10, 15 minutes with us in the idea of health and wellness, Mr. Gibril Roberts. His topic is how much a smile can hide. So please welcome Brother Gibril Roberts. Gibril Roberts.
Hey, how's everyone going today? All right, nice to hear that. So just a little introduction. My name is Gibril Roberts. I've been attending Kean since 2012 now, and I see a couple of familiar faces in here like Brandon, Jackie, new freshman. New freshman year, definitely. So just to get started, I'll just give you a synopsis of why I started the project, How Much a Smile Can Hide, and how much it meant to me. So this is the cover art to How Much a Smile Can Hide. So this is the cover art to How Much a Smile Can Hide right here. So basically, it's a photo of a person smiling, but inside this person smiling, you can see like the pain and like, you know, just the back, not necessarily a backstory, but you know, you can see that there's something behind this person smiling. And so how I started this project up. As I was moved out all my residence at the end of my senior year, last semester, I wanted to do a couple of things for the summer. So during the summer, things consisted of like, you know, losing weight, traveling, you know, just doing nice, fun things and whatnot. Also, I wanted to embark on 3 projects, and one project was a photo series. And so upon making a photo series, I was always just wanted to do a photo series, but I never really had a topic in mind. I never really had a topic in hand on exactly what I wanted to do. And so it pondered for about like a month. And then as a month passed and whatnot, I still was undecided. But then I heard some bad news, unfortunately. A guy that I met in Teaneck, I want to say last year around August, by the name of Jason Magia. Does anyone know Jason? Has anyone ever seen him before? Brandon knows Jason. So could you just speak about Jason for a second? Yeah, so I met Jason around the time of August of 2015, like I stated before. And Jason, you know, I wasn't really, I don't want to say friends, but, you know, me and Jason, we clicked off well. You know, everything was good. He introduced me and just made me feel welcome into his organization. He had an organization called Nation of Creators. And Nation of Creators is pretty much an organization dedicated to help up-and-coming artists, you know, give them a platform to voice their, like, you know, their talents and whatnot. And so upon that time, I met Jason here again at Kane, like around September, and he was just promoting his brand and, you know, whatnot, and just connecting to the students. And unfortunately, that would be the last time I would see him. The next time I would see Jason, well, the next time I heard about Jason, it was a couple of months after school ended, and I seen a missing flyer posted. And I was like, missing flyer? Like, you know, it's kind of crazy. So, like, you know, I just reposted it on my page, and just hopefully that he would come home, like, you know, safe and sound. Unfortunately, a couple hours later, he was found dead. He was found dead, and his source of death was suicide. And, you know, it kind of like hit home with me. Although I only met him twice, it kind of hit home with me, and it was on my mind for like the longest bit of time, for like 3 to 6 weeks. And so with that being said, I started a project, How Much a Smile Can Hide. And so now you may think of the name How Much a Smile Can Hide, like, you know, I got it because I never really sensed, like Brandon said, he never really sensed like the signs. He never really sensed the signs that something was going on with him, something was going wrong with him, anything like that nature. And so I decided to start a project called How Much a Smile Can Hide in order to raise awareness towards depression and suicide awareness or suicide prevention. Throughout that project, I've found many forms of depression, you know, grief depression, and you know, just other various natures of depression. And I would continue to show you some photos from the website. So Grace Fernandez, how many of you know Grace Fernandez? Seeing Grace Fernandez. Grace Fernandez is my buddy. And so at one point in time, you know, we all went through something that's been, you know, major or detrimental to our lives and whatnot. And, you know, and Grace was the first person that volunteered to be a part of my photo series. And so pretty much Grace just talks about, like, you know, the smile and the essence of a smile and what it means and whatnot. She didn't really get too much into her story, but she just offered like an insight as to, like, you know, what a smile is and how, you know, a smile can necessarily hide certain things that's bothering you. Taylor Maxim. Taylor Maxim is a RA, currently RA, and she's I forget her major, but, you know, she's very talented when it comes to, like, you know, arts and crafts. But Taylor lost her mom, I want to say in 2011, I believe, to a car accident. And this was right before she was graduating. And as you can see in this post, you know, Taylor's talking about the loss of her mom and how it affected her, and, you know, how it affected her family and the ones around her. And how many of you lost like a parent or a mother or any, you know, it's like, you know, I can't relate to the feeling, but I created this series so that people can relate to it, and so that you could have some type of, you know, I feel that, and it offers an insight and perspective as to how people that's going through a certain type of depression feel. My friend Brianna Holder, in her last year of high school, one of her best friends, Malia Cowherty, she committed suicide a couple of weeks before the semester ended in December. And, you know, it came as a surprise to her because Malia Cowherty was such a, you know, just a brilliant person, you know, always smiling, making sure her friends were okay, making sure the people around her was, you know, well, you know, make sure the people around her was well. But little did they know that she wasn't going through these problems. And, you know, Brianna Holter, she speaks about the experience and, like, the day of when she found out, and how, like, she was in denial about it, and how she was in denial about it, and how she didn't believe it at first. And, yeah. Michael Marquez. Anybody knows Michael Marquez? Mike Marquez? Mike Marquez, man. That's the guy I met freshman year. Little did I know he had his own battle as well with depression. And as you could read here, or I'm not sure if you can read it, but, like, you know, he started to battle depression early on in his life, around his senior year, when a girl named Nicole, she passed away due to a car accident. And so it affected him heavily because that was, one, his friend, and two, like, you know, once a person dies, or a person that's well affected by the community dies, you can see everyone that that person has affected, and, like, you know, everyone's down and whatnot. And so, you know, he went through a stage of depression and grief and whatnot, and it continued up until, I want to say, about, like, maybe sophomore year of college, sophomore, junior year of college. You know, he's getting better now. Well, he is better now. He's much better now. And the way he's gotten out of it was seeking help, going to the counseling center, relying on people, not relying on people, but speaking to the friends closest to him, and them giving him that not necessarily clarity, but giving them that leaning shoulder to lean on, and, you know, speaking about it and checking up. And so his major part to, like, his major reason to him becoming better was the closure of his friends, and also seeking help throughout the counseling services and whatnot. Abjud Pierre. Abjud is a friend of mine. I met my first semester at King University. And Abjud, he had problems in which I could relate to. As a kid, he used to grow up being bullied and, you know, being made fun of because of his body frame. In his instance, he was too frail. He was too skinny, and, you know, people often, you know, bothered him, making him self-conscious about his body image. Myself, I don't know if you guys could tell me, I got a big head. At the time when I was a kid, I could not take this big head, and people would just make the biggest jokes ever, and I could not take it. But, you know, after a while, you know, you grow to like, well, not you grow, but I've grown to take the jokes and whatnot. But, like, unfortunately, everyone is not able to, like, you know, take jokes and, like, you know, dish them back out. So there was a long time I was, like, self-conscious about my body image and whatnot. I'm not sure how many of you can relate to it, but, you know, body image, well, self-conscious about your body image because of society standards, and just because of the people that you're, like, you know, growing up around. Middle school and high school is definitely, like, a hard time. Like, you know, it may seem like it was the easiest time around, but, like, the peer pressure during that time of our lives is crazy because kids are reckless. But going on to the next one, Jordan Jones, friend of myself and Brandon. Jordan Jones, his mother, no, it's not his mother, his sister has passed away in, I want to say, was it 2014? His sister passed away in 2014 due to breast cancer. I personally witnessed the grief. I personally witnessed the denial myself, as when he found out the news, we was inside of the residence halls, you know, just all relaxing and, you know, just joking amongst each other. And then he had to leave. Like, you know, he didn't really say much when he left, but come to find out that his sister had passed away and whatnot. And so he took, I want to say, about like a week and a half off school. And then when he came back, it's like he wasn't even existing. He wasn't, like, not necessarily he wasn't even existing, but he was like a shell of his inner self. He was just there, and he wasn't really, you know, he wasn't really there, you know what I'm saying? He wasn't, like, physically around. But over time, you know, things got better as, you know, we tried to, as friends, we tried to, like, you know, just uplift our other friends, our brothers, our sisters, and whatnot. Gina Campbell-Verde. Gina Campbell-Verde is a person that attended Kane, and she graduated in 2015 or 2014, I believe. I can't think of the exact year. But upon her story is that she dealt with depression by her cousin, little cousin, after her 14th birthday. A week later, she committed suicide. And, you know, it was crazy to her. Well, now it was, the craziest part about the situation was that, like, you know, she just seen her about a week prior to this event happening. And as she heard the news, her mind was filled with, like, what ifs. Like, what if I could do anything? And like a person can be plagued by what ifs in their mind. Like, regret is regret is known to be one of the biggest like, emotions, or like, what if emotions and whatnot. And so her mind was plagued with regret. Like, what if, like, what if I could have done anything to stop it? Like, what if I was a better cousin? And you constantly beat yourself up for that, or she constantly beat herself up for that. Sade Smith. Sade Smith is a current student at King University, and she's working on her last year. But around 2010, she lost her dad to, I believe, to diabetes. And growing up her whole life, she was a daddy's girl, as you can see up there. She was a daddy's girl. She couldn't live without her father. And, everything was handed to her. Everything was given to her. Once her father died, she, then learned how to live life without her father, one. And two, she had to, everything she works for now, like, she had to work for it by herself. She got her first job after her father passed. She had to deal with school after her father passed, applying to school and whatnot. And, today she's still grieving her father, because it was 6 years. That's a short time. But still, like, it was a pretty bad moment in her life. If you was just like, it's a pretty bad moment in her life, and seeing her around, she's doing well, she's doing better, grieving by the day. And yeah, like the way she honors her father is by doing well in school, and just keeping a promise to herself and to her brother that necessarily everything is going to be okay. And this is the last one. Jevin Brown. Jevin Brown is a senior here at King University, and his grief deals with post-sports grief. So coming to a retirement or a leave of the sport off your own terms. And so with Jevin, he used to play football in high school. He was a varsity linebacker in high school. Jevin Brown, he suffered an injury during a game one day. He tried to make a tackle. Upon trying to make this tackle, he messed up his wrist. Like, he injured his wrist. He broken his wrist. But according to him, he has a high pain tolerance, so he didn't really pay it no mind. So he went to the doctors, and the doctors said that you can no longer play this sport. Of course, the first thing I believe any athlete would attest to is that you're in denial, you still think you can play it. And so the next day he went out on the practice field and tried to play again. The coaches kicked him off the field, saying, "No, you can't come here no more. You're not cleared to play and whatnot." And so upon hearing those words, he no longer went to any football games. He no longer supported the team. He stopped becoming friends with the football players and whatnot. And he just ended off all his relationships with football because he didn't come to it on his own terms, one. And two, he was in denial of the fact that he can't play the sport that he loves anymore. And so many people may not believe that post-sports depression is real, but it is, especially if you're not coming to terms with your own quits and whatnot. It took me a while for me to give up my sport that I love, which is football. But with everyone else, it's a different story. Like, many outlets you can use is coaching, you can just mentor, like, someone else. But for everyone, it's not necessarily the same. But this is the end of my photo series right here, and this is the end artwork. So this is everyone that I interviewed besides Jason Magia, and the special thanks is just to everyone who participated in the story and whatnot. If you would like to further, just read more of the stories, you can follow my photo Instagram at Pitch by Pat on Instagram. But without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Verneda Hamm-Baugh. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. That's good. Okay. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for introducing us to a very complex issue. I guess we might even say at this particular point that the entire nation may be going through a sense of depression and grievance. And this also extends to an entire people who may live under certain circumstances historically, who go through a sense of depression and may not even know they're going through depression as a result of who they are in a system that doesn't recognize their worth or their value or a host of other things. And of course, this whole week we've been talking about that directly and indirectly. Let me introduce our guest speaker. I know time is always an issue for us, and so we'd like to get right into her lecture. Our guest speaker is a longtime friend of mine here at King University and a longtime professor here at King University in the psychology department, Dr. Verneda P. Hamm-Baugh. I call her HB for Hamm-Baugh. Let me just read a little bit of her bio really quickly. Dr. Verneda Hamm-Baugh has taught at Kean University since 1992. She regularly teaches research methods, developmental psychology, and environmental psychology courses. She has served on a variety of committees at Kean University, including the School of Psychology Personnel Committee, the College of Humanities and Social Sciences Retention and Tenure Committee, and the Institutional Review Board. She currently serves as the Executive Director of the School of Psychology. Her research interests are in the area of aging, cognition, and spirituality, and she is actively involved in student research activities. Her topic for the day is Black Women's Health Study, 20 Years of Finding. Please welcome Dr. Verneda Hamm-Baugh.
How's everybody? Doing good? Thank you. At the beginning of the semester, James invited me to participate in this event. And my first reaction is no. I say no to him way too much. Now that I said yes, he's going to come even more often. But because I didn't think I had anything to contribute. And as I thought about it, I said, I do. There's something I'm really excited to talk about. And that's my own participation in a research study that has been examining the health and well-being of Black women. How many of you have ever been part of a research study? Nobody? I think most of us have. Whether you filled out questionnaires or maybe even had some behavioral measurements taken, most of us have done it at least for a short time, and that might only be a one-time deal. But what I'm excited to talk about, very excited, is a research study that I've been a part of for the past 20 years. I've been a participant in the Black Women's Health Study, and it has gone on for 20 years. So I thought I would talk about that. And as I thought about this presentation, it dawned on me when I first started in this study, I sort of did it because, well, I'm a researcher and I know it's hard to get subjects, so if they need me, I'll do it. But it didn't take long for me to really appreciate what my body, my contribution could be to our understanding of Black women and our health. So we're going to talk about the Black Women's Health Study, and I'm going to summarize some of their findings. 20 years of findings is a lot, so I'll summarize just a little bit of it. So why do we even need a study like this? Several reasons. One of them is that Black women historically have been underrepresented at any kind of research, and especially until the early 1990s. There have been more studies more recently, but historically there hasn't been much research. And there's a huge racial disparity in health outcomes. And as long as those disparities exist, we will struggle in terms of helping women in general and Black women in particular. So we know that Black women are much more likely to not only develop certain diseases, but to die more frequently from those than white women. So very, very important. And that, again, fuels my own desire to continue in this study that's been going on for over 20 years now. And I'm really very proud of it. I met a woman about a month ago who's also been a participant. And there's like this immediate sisterhood that, wow, you know, we're really doing something important. If you were to come to my office, you would see my framed certificate for my 20 years of participation. So, what are some of the questions that the Black Women's Health Study is addressing? One, Black women are not more likely to develop breast cancer than white women, but when we do, it's more likely one of these really, really aggressive subtypes of breast cancer. Another question, and why is that? Another question is, well, what role does diet and exercise play in health, breast cancer risk and survival? Why do Black women get lupus more often than white women? Do experiences of racism and discrimination influence the illnesses that Black women develop? And then what habits and routines help us to remain more healthy? And other problems that we tend to develop more than other women: hypertension, uterine fibroids, premature birth, diabetes, we can go on, colon cancer. So this study has been trying to at least find some of the correlates to understanding why these things occur at the rates that they do among black women. So this study started in 1995. I remember clearly getting that first questionnaire in the mail. 65,000 surveys were mailed to black women across the country, and 59,000 women have continued to participate in this study since 1995. And as a researcher, when I see that number, I say, wow, a 91% response rate for over 20 years. And you say, why would that be? And I think it's just that women, black women, realize we've been underrepresented for so long, we have these issues. Yes, use my body, use my information so that we can, you know, help understand what's going on in our lives so much more. So that initial questionnaire in 1995 just assessed, you know, general questions. Surveys are rather long. They take anywhere from 20 minutes to 40 minutes to complete. And they just assessed what illnesses do women have, contraceptive use, cigarette smoking, diet, and the surveys go out every 2 years. In the early years, they were paper surveys. In the early 2000s, we do it all online now. But it looks at what illnesses have we developed, what are our exercise habits, what do we smoke, do we drink, mental health questions, our overall sense of well-being. Many things are assessed. Some subgroups of the sample have provided saliva samples, urine samples, blood samples. And some women who've developed breast cancer and other cancers have consented to having some of those tumors actually analyzed by the Black Women's Health Study. So a lot of information is being gathered from these women. At the beginning of the study, the average age was 38. The youngest was 21, the oldest was 69. And now, fast forward 20 years later, the youngest person obviously is now 42, and the age range is 42 to 91, and a large percentage, 30%, are now senior citizens. That is exciting. Let me tell you, as a researcher who's interested in aging, that is exciting, because now we have this incredible opportunity to track a group of women over this long period of time and look at the aging process. What happens as we get older? Are we more likely, less likely to develop certain illnesses? And to have it focused among Black women particularly makes it even that much more exciting. So did I say this is exciting? I said it's exciting. And not only to look at development of disease, but what keeps us healthy, happy, productive over long periods of time. It's not all doom and gloom. A lot of the data that's going to be gathered will be really, really positive data. So this is just a breakdown. I might mention every one of them, but this is a breakdown of what do we know about these women in the study. I'm using the number 59,000 because that's the number that has continued to provide information. I actually called the Black Women's Health Study last week to find out how many have died in the last 20 years, and the person who can give me that information wasn't available. But we have to assume that there's going to be a certain number of women who have died. So 92% of the sample don't smoke. That's fascinating. It's wonderful. A lot of them exercise regularly, whether it's vigorous, in the gym or jogging or walking briskly. We'll see that walking in itself is a very good thing to do in terms of reducing disease risk. On average, I can attest to this, we gain about 1 pound a year. I'll suck it in. We gain about 1 pound a year. And then what's exciting is, a large percentage, 20%, would not be considered overweight or obese. The number of 41% who take care of a family member, that is not unusual among any population of women, especially women in this age group. All research shows that women are much more likely to become the caretakers in their families. Not only are they raising their children, but they're caring for aging parents at the same time. Self-care, every 2 years we're asked, you know, when's the last time you went to the dentist, the eye doctor? So we see a large percentage of these women are regularly getting mammograms and visiting the dentist. The 29% for colonoscopy is not a low number in terms of, oh, that's bad. You know, most of the recommendations are that you don't get a colonoscopy for 5 or 10 years anyway. So those who are getting them now may be the group that are just getting them for the first time. So that's not a negative number there. Very active group, 14% are spending many hours a week in community activities. 20% report more trouble than usual remembering recent events. That number also is not, I wouldn't think of it as a concern. If you ask most people over the age of 60 or thereabouts, do you have a problem remembering things? 50% will say they have a really bad memory. But if you were to actually test them, their memory is no worse than would be expected. So again, that number doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. But the bottom 4 percentages are the ones that make me very excited, where you have huge, large percentage of women who are classifying themselves as being in good or excellent health in terms of mental health, dental health, overall health. Those are positive signs. And there are self-reports, but I'd like to see those numbers just as a researcher and as a woman myself. So, after I did the research looking at a lot of the data that the Black Women's Health Study has produced, I did a breakdown of what illnesses have been reported over the last 20 years. The 2 at the top, striking and concerning, that over 15,000 are considered obese or have high blood pressure. And those numbers are going to come up again, or at least those illnesses, in just a few minutes. But you can see the breakdown in terms of how many women reported these events in the last 20 years. These are the non-cancer illnesses: stroke, glaucoma, heart attack. And then that number 2,000 for breast cancer, again, striking, concerning. That, that many women are being diagnosed with breast cancer, which is not necessarily unusual. It's the #1 cancer among women in general. But we know that the percentage of these women who get breast cancer, a large percentage, will develop one of those very, very aggressive subtypes that results in, very fast mortality. So those are, as we gather this data, it gives direction in terms of what do we need to focus on, what correlates can we identify that relate to the health and well-being, especially these breast cancer, hypertension, obesity, and diabetes was really high on the list also. So what I decided I would do is to pick just a few of these events, breast cancer and stressors, and look at what the Black Women's Health Study has found just on those issues. There are over 160 publications from this study, so I just narrowed it down to some that I find really intriguing and concerning. So we know that Black women are actually less likely to develop breast cancer than white women, but when we do, it's one of those really, really bad ones. So this is correlational data. Nothing here is going to say, oh, having more children causes you to have breast cancer. Absolutely, we can't do that. But correlational data is important. It's the first step for us to begin to narrow in on factors that are important so that we can do more research. If you think back to when researchers first identified cigarette smoking as being related to lung cancer, it took years before we could say cigarette smoking causes lung cancer. But it's that initial information. We need to know that there's a relationship, and then we do further research to find more answers. So I just wanted to mention that. So some of the correlates that have been found among this sample of women is that having more children seems to be related to having a higher risk of one of the aggressive breast cancers. Breastfeeding seems to reduce the risk. And that's important in this sample because black women in general are much less likely to breastfeed their children or less likely in general and they breastfeed for a short amount of time in general than white women. Those women who had a higher intake of vegetables, fruits, who exercised, who did not use oral contraceptives for long periods of time, less likely to use hormones, they had a lower risk of these subtypes of breast cancer. And of course, those who didn't smoke had a much lower risk of one of these subtypes. Very interesting. We know that there are genetic variants. Genes do matter in terms of developing breast cancer. But there was one variant found among this group of women that seems to be present only in people of African ancestry. So a lot more has to be done on understanding what that genetic variant is. Very important. Also, this study was able to find that the models, predictors, the prediction models for women being at risk for breast cancer, the ones that currently exist, don't seem to apply to black women. So again, if the model of predicting breast cancer and directing women into treatments earlier, if they don't apply to black women, then we're going to miss a lot of black women in terms of their risk for developing breast cancer. We wouldn't have known that if we didn't have this huge sample of women who were providing data regularly for us to understand that. So that's very, very important finding. So just from the things that I've just said, you know, what can we do to reduce our risk? And a lot of the recommendations are no different for any other illnesses. What we eat, how we do or do not exercise, not smoking, all of those things seem to apply for this sample of women also. Another, we know, all of us know about stress. How many of us have ever experienced stress, right? Everybody's going to raise their hand. And we know that stress, especially chronic, prolonged stress, produces conditions in our bodies that adversely affect our immune systems, right? Not surprising, we all know it. Some of us may have experienced it to some extent. So what I wanted to do with the data that they have published is to look at two specific types of stressors and how they impact the health and wellness of black women. Many of the women in this study report the stressors that most of us can relate to: heavy family responsibilities, neighborhood problems, and what I wanted to focus on is neighborhood form. Where you live, it does matter. And we all know from research that your zip code quite often predicts health outcomes. So that's what I wanted to focus on. And one of them has to do with weight gain and obesity. From the Black Women's Health Study, we know that those women who live in neighborhoods with lower socioeconomic status had a greater weight gain over 10 years than participants who lived in other or higher socioeconomic status. So again, what does the environment have to do with gaining weight? Well, we know it has a lot to do, especially when we talk about neighborhoods, whether we talk about noise level, pollution, crowding, density. All of those variables uniquely have an effect on us in terms of our social isolation. People who are in neighborhoods that have higher levels of those stressors actually interact with their neighbors less. And we know that social interaction impacts health also. So we have this, all of these variables merging at the same time and impacting at least this sample of women, and we know it impacts people in general. They also found that women who live in neighborhoods that allow for walking showed less of these issues with weight gain and obesity than women who live in sprawling communities. So if you live in a neighborhood that has sidewalks, you live in a neighborhood that has neighborhood stores that you can walk to, versus living in more rural or very suburban areas, that you will suffer less in terms of weight gain and obesity. So that's interesting also. Also, women who lived in what would be classified as disadvantaged neighborhoods are more likely to develop diabetes. And that is when we take into account things like income. So it's not just a matter of how much money you make, but there's something about the neighborhood form itself. One of them could be, you may be familiar with the term food deserts. Has anyone ever heard the term food desert? I actually live in a food desert. I didn't know that. Food desert is a community that does not have a large supermarket, right? So access to things like healthy fruits and vegetables may not be present. That's a stressor. The fact that now I have to drive 3, 4, 5 miles away, or catch the bus and go 3, 4, 5 miles away, that becomes a stressor. So again, we have all of these variables merging at the same time that really, really affect us in the long term. And again, we've mentioned obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure. Same is true. Neighborhood form influences risk of hypertension. It also, to a very small degree, but it's there, it's significant, that mortality rates are also impacted based on neighborhood form, where you live, your zip code, your health. It's a great video if you ever want to search it. Your zip code, your health. It talks a lot about just where you live and how it affects your health. And this is just more of the same. As the value of your home increases, the risk of some of these illnesses decreases. As the value of your home decreases, the risk, because it's going to be dependent or influenced by the neighborhood form, increases your risk of hypertension. So there's a lot that we need to look at, a lot that needs to be done. The other stressor that I wanted to mention is racism. In 1997, and a later one, I don't remember the date, but pretty much the entire questionnaire that we received dealt with issues of racism, discrimination, and feeling as if we've been treated unfairly. Many questions on that survey. So they looked at experiences of racism in work, housing, and with police, and then just a sense of being unfairly treated because of one's race. And the question is, does that influence health? So taking all of the variables that they've been gathering, they've determined that 58% of the participants reported having racism at work, 35% in housing, 23% with police. 18% felt that they were being treated as less intelligent because of their race, and 9% felt that they received poor service. Young women much more likely to report experiences of racism, and that may have to do with them being out in more environments maybe than older women. Don't quite know, but that could be one explanation. So what did they find? So between 1997, when the survey was done, and then the next survey, or the later survey, 2005, women who reported more frequent experiences gained more weight than those who reported less. So again, we're talking about a stressor, and stress impacts not only immune system, but probably psychological, and definitely psychological health as well. And the occurrence of obesity was greater among women who had more experiences of racism. And that had nothing to do with whether you lived in a segregated or integrated neighborhood. Another correlate with, racism is also correlated with the development of uterine fibroids. They occurred more often in women who reported higher levels of racism than women who reported lower levels. However, women who had higher levels, reported higher levels of racism, those who had stronger support systems did not show the same level of the development of uterine fibroids. So social support, that comes up across all research. The higher your level of social support, the better able you are to handle whatever the stressors are. And in this case, it's the same for racism. And this is the very first study to suggest that racism may contribute to increased occurrence of uterine fibroids. But if we take racism as another stressor, then it's not really surprising, because stress is going to have the same effect on our bodies. Also interesting has to do with asthma. Women who reported higher levels of racism were much more likely to develop asthma during the same time period, 1997 to 2005. And again, it may have to do with just the effect of stress on the immune system and affecting the airways. So that's very interesting also. And this is basically what I just mentioned, just about how we need to understand how these stressors, these specific stressors, are having their effect. Much of it has to do with how it has an effect on the immune system. And there are other studies, I didn't summarize them here, but the Black Women's Health Study also collected data on abuse, childhood abuse. And they find that childhood abuse, that stressor, shows the same types of patterns as we see here. Hypertension, obesity big time for women who experience childhood abuse, hypertension, obesity, and diabetes. So what do we know? What does the Black Women's Study tell us? Well, they have published more than 160 research findings over the last 20 years. And the goal is to first identify what are the correlates that impact the lives of Black women. And let me move on to this one. And as I've already said, one of the words here is exciting. Now that we have all of this data and we have this population that is getting older, we have this incredible chance now to look at illnesses that are related to aging, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, memory problems. So where we go from here is to keep collecting the data that we're collecting, but now to shift the focus to these illnesses that are related to aging. Very exciting time. So what are some of the future research? The plans are to look at factors that predict better memory, factors related to dental health, influences of religion and spirituality on health practices. I collected data several years ago, did a study that looked at the relationship between religion and spirituality and overall well-being, psychological well-being, not physical well-being. And there's a very strong relationship between those two. And they've already started a lot of the data on sleep quality and shift work. I believe one of the last surveys that we completed dealt almost exclusively with sleep. So we're looking at the relationship between sleep. So what does it mean? The more we know, the more we can do. Exciting time in terms of research. So I'm very thankful, extremely thankful to be part of this study, and I've let the Black Women's Health Study know that quite a bit. The investigators, the research team, fantastic group of people. Since the 1990s, there are a number of studies that are looking just at Black women's health. So the Black Women's Health Study has begun to link to some of these other studies, some that only look at health disease, some that are only looking at breast cancer, some that are looking at healthy living in general. And the Black Women's Health Study has connected with them, and they're sharing data. So it's a very exciting time. And that was my last slide.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hamm-Baugh. I mean, I learned a lot. And what we're going to do right now is, for the moments that we have left, is open it up to questions from the floor. If you have any questions, do we have that other mic anywhere? We had another mic yesterday. Do you have it, David? All right. If not, we do have it. Okay. We're going to have another mic, but we want to open it up to some questions, and you can direct those questions, of course, directly to Dr. Hamm-Baugh, and she'll do her best to answer those questions. I have one. Okay, well, I have one right now. I'm not even sure if it's a question. Maybe it's a comment and a question combined in one. You mentioned in your slides the relationship between racism and the health problems, and the women were reporting a correlation. I would suggest, and again, I haven't looked at the study, but just being a historian, I would suggest that there's a greater correlation than that report would show, in the sense that in order to make that assessment for many of the women who took the exam, they have to be able to identify on some level that they're being affected by racism. Okay, go ahead.
Because it might change what you...
Okay.
You're right. But when the questions about racism and discrimination are sent, we don't even know that they're connecting it to the development of illness.
Okay.
So as I filled out the questionnaire, it's just, did I experience these events, and how much do I experience them?
Right.
So you're right. I think on an individual level, we aren't even aware of what some of those events are doing, or at least we don't pay attention to it. On some level, we aren't even aware. But we don't know the connection is being made.
Exactly. I think those people who took the survey, did that. But I think overall, I think there would probably be something like a geometric progression in terms of what's actually happening, because many of the people who, I'm just surmising this, who would have taken a survey like that would be looking at the more overt forms of racism.
Right.
And so the police did this to me, this person
right.
said that to me, I walked into the elevator, somebody grabbed their,
right.
hook. But a lot of the racism that we experience is not the overt
right.
form of racism. And I would dare suggest from all of my studies that it is the covert forms that are far more devastating than the overt form. That's what we can identify, but it's that subtle thing. So based upon that, this study, in terms of the overall effects, would be a geometric progression. It would just balloon out. And not only in terms of black women, but also in terms of black men and black people in general. So anyway, if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand.
I had a question for Gibril. What are your plans for the interviews that you did?
Let him answer the question.
So, like, how did I go about doing the interviews?
No, what are your plans now? What are you going to do with that information?
Now, I didn't really think too much into it, honestly. I was going to ask you a question, as far as like when it comes to, like, being a creator. You started this thing 21 years ago. Am I correct? So you started this thing 21 years ago.
As a participant.
As a participant, okay. And so I just wanted to know, like, I don't have much, like, I took Dr. Yeti's research senior seminar class, and we conducted a research assignment, and so I know how to, like, start a research assignment and whatnot. I know how to go about it. But as far as, like, furthering it and doing something that, like, that's a passion that you're passionate about, like, how would you start it? Because, like, I really, honestly, I can say this out loud, I have no idea, like, what to do afterwards. I just did it. I didn't know it was going to get, like, a lot of recognition. I just did it because it was something that was on my mind at the time, and I just wanted to express it freely. I didn't have, like, thoughts of pursuing it. I didn't say thoughts of pursuing it. I didn't have thoughts of, bringing it to another level. But, like, throughout, since the end of September, I've been having a lot of thoughts about taking it to the next level, but I don't have those resources on how to take it to the next level.
You do. That's a big question. But, when you were giving your presentation and you talked about the athlete, and that sense of what happens to athletes when they can no longer be athletes, that's a research study right there. So I would be interested in knowing exactly what levels of, and I'll use the term loosely, depression or sadness do, let's say football players, since that's your experience, the football players experience when they can no longer play. And is it different when you talk about, okay, I played in high school and now I don't? I continued to college and now I don't. I continued to semi-pro or pro and now I don't. Is there a difference in the experience of no longer being an athlete? So you could easily interview athletes who used to play and now they can't, and then just assess their sense of loss or what makes one player more likely to feel a sense of loss compared to another. So why can I end my career and move on to something quickly when someone else can't? So that could be a research study right there. So you do have the ability and the resources. It's you, your microphone, and your note-taking. That's it.
I have a question, and I'm not exactly sure if you answered this, but you mentioned about the models for breast cancer that the model templates don't involve women of color.
Not that they don't involve them.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure exactly how you quoted, but it somehow doesn't fit towards the, I guess, the gene makeup of black women.
Yeah, no, not the genetics. The genetics was a different finding.
Mm-hmm.
That there tends to be this variant that many women have, but there's another one that only people of African descent have.
Okay.
So that needs much more.
Okay, so that was my question. What do you think, or how would we go about getting that investigated? Since it's
We're doing it now.
okay.
So as women develop breast cancer, we can study them to see what percentage of them have this genetic variant.
Okay.
What is this genetic variant? Can we now treat it? The idea about models that help predict breast cancer risk, there are models that, and many women, when you go to the doctor, you're asked questions like, at what age did you have your first child? I'm trying to think of what some of the questions are, because they become part of a model that predict your likelihood. Do you have a sister or a mother or a grandmother who's ever had breast cancer? That's part of the model, and it places you into a category of potential risk.
Mm-hmm.
What this study found is that, for whatever reason, that model doesn't seem to fit black women as well. It could have to do with this variant, but they didn't go that far to say it.
Okay.
Why don't we fit the model
Mm-hmm.
as well as white women? So we
Mm-hmm.
need to change the model.
Yes.
I think we have one over there.
I'm curious. You said that seeing that the youngest participants are now 42, do they have any plans on sending out more data to younger African American women in hopes to compare the younger women of today to the older women and seeing how we're either progressing?
That would be a great study. They don't have a plan. They're not bringing on any new participants. That would be a great study.
Yeah, because I'm curious, because I know I speak to my grandmother about it a lot, and she always says that, you know, sometimes between like an older African American woman generation and the younger, there's either miscommunication. It's either, you know, you're not really getting the things that you need sometimes to progress and do things better, or, you know, now that we know, you know, you shouldn't smoke or you shouldn't do this, or the younger woman, because you have this information, deciding not to smoke and not to do this to make sure that later on you are healthy. So.
Right. I understand what you're saying, that information is just different compared to 20 years ago. So what I was exposed to 20 years ago is different than what a 20-year-old is being exposed to, or they're getting more of it, or something different. And that could be something that influences later health. But I know this particular study is not bringing on new participants. But thankfully, other studies are present that are going on that might answer that question.
Any other questions?
Hi, thanks. That was informative. Does the survey ask any questions about health-seeking behavior? And
Yes.
do you remember any of those?
Yes, they did.
Yeah. I mean, if
They
it's just because
did.
somebody on the person who spoke on Tuesday mentioned that some of the barriers around mental health-seeking behavior in communities where mental health isn't considered, or is considered a taboo topic. And so it would be interesting to see some of the relationships between access to healthcare.
Exactly, and there were
Attitudes to
many
healthcare.
questions about how far do you have to go, how long do you have to wait, do you have a primary care physician? You know, there were many that would touch on health seeking. I just don't know what the findings were.
And I think to go to your question also, and Dr. Hamm-Baugh can weigh in on this, the shape of the culture that you exist in plays a role in this. There's definitely a causal relationship between your diet and the culture you live in, how you think about psychological issues and so on and so forth. You know, one of the things that I like about what Dr. Fagan has done, at least in identifying the areas of activity in his book, Living with Racism, it allows a person at least to look at the various areas of human activity. And there are 9 basic areas of human activity. We might add 10. Economics, education, entertainment, law, labor, and politics, war, religion, and sex. And human beings are active in those all the time. The 10th probably, and I'm adding the 10th now, would be health. All right? And in identifying those areas of activity, which many people don't really identify those areas. They think about this as in kind of like a monolith. You know, something's wrong with me. They don't think about the various areas of activity and how interaction in those areas of activity affect you in the areas of race and other things. Once we can identify those areas of activity, we can key in on certain factors in those areas because those areas are interrelated. So a person might think that they're not being affected by, let's just say, racism in one area of activity, but they're being affected by another area of activity, not realizing that the area of activity that they are being affected by, it has a direct relationship to the one that they think they're not being affected by, because they're all interrelated. Yeah, so all of this becomes a part of a scenario that I think we need much more training and much more understanding of, and we just have to do some work. Yeah.
That makes me think when I teach environmental psychology, I always start, well, I don't always, but I have started class by saying, why can't Johnny read? Because we often point to people as, something's wrong with, why can't that little boy read? What's wrong with him? What's wrong with his family? And I say we have to step way back and say, where does Johnny live? What does Johnny eat? What is Johnny exposed to? How long do his parents work? It's so complicated, but it has so much more to do with where we are and what we're exposed to than any one of us individually. And I think that's what I hope what the Black Women's Study is trying to get at.
The best studies done by one of the great black psychologists who happened to be a good friend of mine who passed much too early. He did some pioneering work in this in a different type of way than some of his people that came before him, was Dr. Amos Wilson. In his book, The Psychological Development of the Black Child, he explores just what you're talking about and what happens to the black child by the time they get to be 5 years old. All right, what happens psychological, what helps to explain why Johnny is not reading, which helps to explain why Johnny sees himself the way he does. I can remember as a 5-year-old child myself looking in the mirror and wishing that I would see a white face looking back at me. All right? So there is something happening that many of us do not recognize, and we take it for granted because in this society, since no one talks about it, we're not educated about it, it becomes normal. All right? It becomes normal. And so thus nobody sees it, and then they point the finger. What's wrong with Johnny? All right, it becomes normal. So I've always said in all of my courses that where I teach this subject, racism in the United States and probably in the world in general, has various forms of it has become normal. So if you talk about it, people say you're raising the race card. If you even try to describe it, you are raising the race card. You're not supposed to talk about it because it's become normal. And that has a lot to do with what just happened just the other day. All right? We can make a direct causal relationship between what happened and those issues. Anybody else?
I just wanted to ask, where can we access the health study online?
Absolutely. I believe it's housed in at Boston University now. Okay. www.bwhs.edu. If that doesn't work, just type in Black Women's Health Study.
Okay.
And you'll see there's so many publications, and much of what I summarized came right from those publications. And you can read them from every year, 95, 97, 99. You can read them all.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you then. Let's please have a round of applause for Dr. Hamm-Baugh. Please. I really appreciate her coming. We're going to have her back again in the future if she will consent to come back and talk about some other issues, talk about this issue again. And we have a lot of study to do. I always tell people, and I've been saying this throughout the week, you know, learn something about everything. Everything in the known universe is interrelated, so it's incumbent upon you to pick up books and study and pick up articles and learn something about everything. Once again, December 15th in Downs Hall at 1 o'clock, we will be celebrating Kwanzaa. All are welcome. Please show up for Kwanzaa. We're going to feed as many people as we possibly can, and we're going to have a good program for you. All right, we have some good artists coming this year, well-known artists that are going to be coming and performing. So December 25th, you'll see it up on the plasma boards around the college. There'll be notifications. Oh, I'm sorry, December 15th. I keep saying December 25th because that's that other day. But, you know, but anyway, December 15th. Thank you so much for coming. And please stay attentive. Look at the plasma boards for our programs and the programs of the other academic programs on campus, Jewish studies, women's studies, etc., Latino studies. We all have programs, and these programs quite often interrelate. Thank you so much.